Welcome to Writers Are the Best Weirdos, the podcast starring me, Julia Roberts. I am a creativity coach, speaker, writer, and a weirdo. Aren't you? We're going to answer a lot of questions about pubbing and promoting and marketing your books, so stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Writers Are the Best Weirdos podcast. I'm here today with Dara Hyde of Hill Nadell Agency. And we're going to get to talk to an agent. Woohoo, you guys. Who gets to talk to an agent? It's not that hard. She's going to help us. Let me just tell you a little bit about her first. So, Dara is a senior agent at the Hill Nadell Literary Agency and represents a wide range of fiction and nonfiction, including literary and genre fiction, graphic novels, narrative nonfiction, which is memoir, and memoir, young adult, and children's literature. Her clients include Myriam Chancy, Angie Cruz, Natashia Deon, Maggie Downs, Jamie Harrison, Matt Mendez, Justin Eisinger, Jean Ha, Rye Hickman, Soo Lee, Jordan Morris, and Samuel Sattin. And they have been winners or finalists in the Women's Prize, NAACP Image Award, the Carnegie Medal, the Eisner Award, and Anthony Award. So she's got a good roster going on. She's got a good nose for a good writer. Before joining Hill Nadell, Dara was an editor and rights manager at Grove Atlantic in New York City. So let's welcome Dara to the show. I'm really happy to spend time with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Julie. I'm happy to be here too.
Cool, very cool. So, I think there's a lot of aura around the word agent, and I believe that comes from both sides, which is interesting. I'm not sure that the writers really understand that the publishers have an aura around agencies as well, and agents, because the publishers rely on you to find who they should publish because they don't have time. It's like the only sales force in the industry, in the world that I'm aware of, where the buyer buys lunch for the seller because they rely on you. They need you, right? So it is your nose for what will work and who will want it and who will make a good business decision to buy this work that keeps the writer's funnel into the publishing funnel going. Am I right?
That is very true. We are matchmakers in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. And both sides really need you. That's why the aura, right?
Yes.
I can see it. It's right there.
Yeah, I know, little aura.
You got your little agent halo. Excuse me. We've gotten off on a silly foot. But so tell us a little bit first, just what an agent does or why a writer wants one or doesn't want one. What does an agent do?
So if someone wants to go in traditional publishing and not maybe go through the self-publishing or hybrid route, they need an agent because, as you mentioned, publishers rely on agents to help them find the right fit. So we're matchmakers. We're not just looking for, I think, I want to match this book or this writer with this publisher. We're also developmental agents a lot of times. Not every agent is, but oftentimes we may find something that has a lot of promise, but may need work. So we oftentimes will work with a writer if we choose to bring them on and represent them to polish it up, spiff it up, make sure it's really ready. Because once we send it out to editors at publishing houses, it needs to be at a certain level of professionalism.
Right, it's your only option. It's your only chance. You can't send it out again, slightly change 4 weeks later, right?
And you need to make it so the editor can't say no. And part of my job is to figure out what that magic sauce is to make it so that an editor can't say no. And you only need one yes for an agent, although sometimes multiple agents may be interested in your work, and you only need one yes from an editor, even though multiple editors may come to the table. So, there are times when it's a really long process. That development process can take a while. Finding the right editor can take a while. And in addition to the writer, we're the person who's with the work the longest, because we see it through that developmental process, selling it to a publisher, and then that whole life of the book, production, publication, post-publication, if there are any ancillary rights that we're working on, like foreign and translation or film and media. And then even after the book is long published, maybe it's gone out of print and we want to bring it back in print, and we're keeping track of royalties and we're keeping track of contracts. We negotiate that initial contract. And we basically advise our clients on all aspects of what they're doing. And sometimes I'm part of a bigger team if it's somebody who has a lot of film and media work, or they work in another genre. Maybe there's a manager or someone else. But oftentimes it is me and the writer sort of on this journey together, which is one reason why it's really important to find not just any agent, but an agent that is a good fit for the writer.
Personally, I think that is so misunderstood. I just got to find an agent. It's like just having to find a husband. You have to find the agent or the husband, that you can live with and that you love and that will help you and that has your interest at heart. When you put your book in their hands and they come back with commentary, you're going to be thinking, oh my God, that's spot on. Instead of thinking, who are they? Because you've come to an agreement or an understanding of what the vision is. And now it's a collaborative work, which is really important. Writers don't even understand that it's a collaborative work. It becomes a collaborative work. And so you're picking a collaborator and they have to really kind of get what you're doing. They may do it really differently from you. They may go about it like in an opposite way of creative thinking. They might be much more, you might have a vision and they might have ideas, or vice versa. You might have a million ideas and they might give you a vision that'll help you determine which ideas matter, So it's just a really important start of that journey that becomes more and more collaborative as a publisher gets involved. And then readers are their own collaborators. They each imagine what you're saying in an entirely different way. So they bring their own collaboration to it.
And writing can be really solitary, but once you want to become a professional writer, it becomes a complete collaboration. It's not something that you do alone. There's so many people that have to help you along that journey to get published, and you have to be ready for that. And so one of the things that agents are looking for is someone who is ready to be a professional writer, not just a writer who works on their own and may create amazing things, but there's that next level of being ready to be professional. And that does require collaboration, and it requires maybe an understanding of what it is that you're actually working on and how it fits in the current marketplace, as opposed to maybe books you read 30 years ago. You need to sort of know.
I take that comment personally.
It is something.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
But that is kind of what you're relying on the agent for, to some degree.
Yes.
But you need to have an open mind to understanding that.
Yes.
If somebody has a way to, update your point of view, you need to be open to that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are different ways that agents work and publishers work. And so there are times when, maybe something comes to me and I can see its promise, but I don't think I'm the right fit. And that's not a reflection of the talent of the writer. It's just a reflection of, I don't see a path or a vision forward for this, or I'm not an expert in this, or I don't even have the contacts to know, because there's so many different kinds of publishing. I had someone who came to me recently with a nonfiction book, which I actually may be someone who would read it. It was a topic that might interest me, but it was much more in sort of practical nonfiction, like a how-to. And that isn't an area that I do. And there are agents who are so good at that and have amazing contacts and relationships and know what that process is like and what that kind of a book needs to look like to take to a publisher. And so even though I could actually be someone who'd be like, oh, if that was in a bookstore, I might buy it, but I don't know what to do with it personally. So there's a lot of considerations when you think, oh, I might be ready for an agent. It's not just, oh, who's sold the most or who gets the most money. There's so many considerations.
But also, if someone turns you down, it isn't because they dislike your work necessarily. It's often, I remember I got my agent because someone read it and liked it, but that wasn't their territory. And they recommended someone they knew would like it or does represent that kind of work. So that's really how, because you are just networking and they're just people and they're just, you know what I mean? And somebody said, we like it, but it's just not my territory. I don't have those editors. You know who does? You know what I mean? And that's how I got to my agent. Not 30 years ago. I don't know what you're saying, Dara. But 10. Anyway, that being said, you had mentioned something about standing out in the submissions pile. And I think that's really, sometimes when a writer is approaching an agent, they kind of are coming at it from a place of fear. And it's going to show. And that doesn't mean you're not afraid, because you just have to find a way to do it scared. But you have to do it in a way that stands out. And that's what I think you probably have a really good insight into. So how do I stand out in a submission?
So I think some of it is trying to let go of some of that fear to a degree, which is very difficult. I think it's good to keep in mind that agents deal with a lot of rejection as well, because we send our books that we believe in off to publishers, and they oftentimes say no. So think about the fact that you're sending it to someone who wants to find something fantastic, and someone who is also used to rejection and oftentimes is not trying to be rude or mean. Like, we want to find great things. So if you think about it that way, you're like, I want to find the agent who is going to be a good fit, but they want to find me. So there is that, even if
They're dating, they're dating, right?
Yes.
They might swipe left, but
They might. And
looking.
we're overworked and oftentimes overwhelmed, but we do want new things. So oftentimes, I think how to stand out is to do your research first. And that used to be much harder. There used to be, I've been in publishing long enough that I remember these, there were these giant, almost phone books that you would have to go to, maybe a library.
Writers Market, I think it was.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's where you would find out who the agents were. And that was before the internet. And now you can find agents in so many different ways. So I want to talk about just a couple quick ways that are free or very little cost to find and actually do that research. Because I think the more research someone does, the less fear they're going to have, because they're going to have knowledge as a base. So,
and the more likely they are to get that connection, because that agent doesn't feel like, I don't do that, why are they writing to me? They feel like, oh, here's somebody who understands me.
You want to have a targeted submission. So there's Publishers Weekly does their deal roundups that you can oftentimes find on their website, and that's free. Publishers Marketplace does a free email called Publishers Lunch, and they will also talk about the deals that are made. And so if you start subscribing to those things or listening to podcasts like this, you will start to get a more familiarity with what books are selling, who's selling them, who's buying them. You can start to see, what agents are out there. It used to be, Twitter is where a lot of agents are. I know that Twitter's a little broken right now, but most agencies have websites. And so even if you just go into your bookstore and you go into the section of the bookstore where you think, if my book was finished and published, I would be here. And you start looking at books that you admire from that section, and you go to the back and the acknowledgements. Most writers thank their agent. You can start seeing, a couple of agents are popping up in this area. Maybe this agent represents a lot of this work. And you can
this can't be overstated. This can't be overstated as a method, because it's two major things in that little thing. One is understanding what shelf your book would sit on. And if you don't understand what shelf your book would sit on, you don't understand what you're writing toward, what reader you're writing toward, right? So nobody has their own shelf. It's not like, oh, here's the Julia shelf. I have to sit on a how-to, I have to sit on a mother, parenting, or a diet, or self, all these different kinds of things. Even fiction has many, many subsections nowadays. So first of all, just understanding where you would sit is a big deal. It shows the agent that you get it. And then understanding where you sit gives you 20, 30 books to look at and call the agents. Which, that's how I found agents back in the Stone Age.
now they have websites and they have submission guidelines, and they make it really easy. They will say, this is how we want to see submissions. And I cannot stress enough that you have to follow those rules. Even if it means you have to redo parts of your submission, you just have to follow those rules, because they're there to help the agent find the best work for whatever their method is. And I want to say a number that I think will be disheartening, and yet I think it's a really good thing to hear. I am just going to pull up my tally right now. So it used to be, I would say 10,000 queries a year. I'm at least 18,000 when I'm open a year, which is at least 350 queries a week. So if you think about that, and I only, I have 50 to 60 clients, not all of them are active at all times. Math, there's a very small amount of people I'm going to bring on. And I'm not alone in that. And so you have to do something that's going to help you stand out, and you have to do your research, and you have to follow their guidelines, because the easiest way for me to say no is for someone to not follow those guidelines.
And it's not like they're being punitive. They're not like saying, oh, she did it two-sided, that's against the rules. No, it's not punitive. It's a matter of being able to sit in the methodology that Dara wants to read things, whether that's a Kindle and 100 pages or a Kindle and 10 pages or whatever it is they've asked for. And otherwise, she has to go way out of her way to read your thing, and she has too many as it is. So it's just the first and easy non-no. And everything you do has to be a non-no.
Yes, exactly.
It's not even yet a yes, it's just a not a no, so these guidelines are very important, and
it's easy
not a
to do.
punitive, it's not a
No,
punitive thing.
it's not punitive, and it's easy to do now in a way that I didn't think it used to be. There's a lot less of that mystery, that aura, because you can go online and see someone. A lot of agents have entries on the manuscript wish list website, which I do as well. So manuscript wish list, it's MSWL. You can go and agents will have pictures, they'll have bios, they'll say what they're looking for. They oftentimes update it every season. They'll tell you what TV shows they like. It'll really give you a sense of what they like. I think especially children's and YA agents are on there, but there are other agents on there as well. And that can give you a really good sense of what they like. And then even looking at the agency websites, you can see, oh, what is coming out from this agency? Can I see my book would be one of those? If it doesn't fit at all, you might not be looking at the right place.
Right. I didn't know about the wish list. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, manuscript wish list is really, really great, especially when people keep things up to date. But it's a really great resource. And there are times when people will even use that hashtag online to say what they're looking for. There's something I'll see. Yeah.
Hashtag MSWL.
So there are lots of different ways. So do your research first is what I would say. And then you have to be ready to query. So you have to be ready to become that professional collaborative writer. You don't want to send out a first draft because that's just not going to be ready. Sometimes there's just that sense of oh my gosh, I finished. And I got to find an agent today. And you have psyched yourself up to do it, but that's honestly not going to be your best bet. So you want to do several drafts. You want to, if you have a beta reader, which basically just means someone who can read your work and give you honest feedback. Oftentimes a spouse or a friend is not necessarily the best beta reader because they will tell you they love it. And someone will be like, my mom read it. And I'm like, I am so happy your mom read it. Is your mom a professional? No. So try to find maybe
your beta reader doesn't have to be a professional, but it does have to be at least once removed from you so that there can be honesty.
Yes. So sometimes that's a writing group, or there's someone who is just one step removed, maybe, who could give you that real sense of feedback. Sometimes people do hire someone for that, but you don't need to. So then the other thing I would say is read it out loud, because when you read something out loud, you will find out where you stumble and where things are well, that's a little wonky. And that will really help the flow of your writing. So reading it out loud and then be like, okay, I'm ready. Then you have to work on your query letter, and you want your query to be targeted to each agent. As you mentioned before, the agent wants to know why you're querying them. They want it to seem like they've done their research. You want to say, I'm querying you because my book, like the books you've represented, has some sense of, you have to show that connection. Agents love knowing that you've
That's the other reason going to that shelf makes sense, because now you can say, I see that you represented XYZ and I feel like I have a similar tone, or I feel like I have a similar reader.
Exactly. So you target each one of them. You don't send out a blast email or a blast submission. You want at least that intro has to be unique. And then after that, you can have a description of your book that is what you use for everyone. And there are very easy ways to do it. You want to talk about, if it's a novel, you want to talk about your protagonist and their goals and the setting, but you don't have to go into huge detail. You want to sort of have that hook, that what is it about, big picture, give a couple details. And then you want to say a little bit about yourself. You want to say, if you don't have to have writing credits, but if you do, that's great. Even if it's, something that is tangential. I had someone who's like, well, I'm a technical writer for, a biological, pharmaceutical company. That isn't necessarily relevant to the novel, but it's good to know that they have professional writing experience in a very different field. And you don't have to be cute with it. You can just say who you are. I
think if you're a cute person, though, you want to put but if you're a precise person, it's a voice. Exactly. If you're that technical writer, the chances are your novel is also really sort of specific and precise. And so your language in your letter will similarly be your personality per se, but you don't have to be who you aren't. You want to be who you are.
Yes. And if you're someone who has, if some outside experience informs your work, mention that. If you're writing about, a bombing run in World War II, and you also happen to be, an airplane mechanic, that's actually really great to know, right? Even if you seem like, well, that doesn't seem totally, it's not in my novel, and it's a historical novel, and I do this. And no, there are ways that you can connect maybe who you are to your work that gives
Mhm.
the agent a better sense of where you're coming from and maybe what your impetus is for the book. And so you want that letter to be professional. You want it to have a voice. You want it to have no typos.
That's punitive.
Oh boy. I mean, the dear Mr., and then, the founder of our agency, Hill Nadell, was Fred Hill, who passed away many years ago. And so we still get queries to him, which is fascinating to me.
I mean, no typos. I can see that absolutely. When you're dealing with writers, and a lot of agents basically are writers and editors. That's their background. So when you're dealing with writers, unless you're going to be way out there with odd talk or short sentence, phrases, wow, exclamation point, or what, they're writers, so that they have their little peccadillos. You don't know what their peccadillos might be. My father used to be so mad that pencil became a verb. You know, and I still, every time if I say impact as a verb, I still have a little thing of like, some writers will hate that.
Yes.
So I mean,
Well, and you want
writers.
voice, you just want it to be professional.
Right.
And I think, there are times when people try too hard. I've seen, people send me things covered in glitter. People who are way too familiar and make me feel a little bit like, wow, have you been, online stalking me? Like you want to try to find a professional voice that gives also a sense of your personality and of your writing. And gives as much information as they've asked for.
If you have a stalker personality, should that come through?
Yeah,
that's funny.
I know it's usually, I guess that's a red flag. And if you're like, oh, I'm really interested in that kind of work, then maybe it would be a good fit.
Funny.
Yeah. So you want to
but you don't tell the whole story. I don't tell the ending.
You need just a few paragraphs. You don't want it to be too long. And then there are other times, people may
like
ask
in the synopsis, you tell the whole story, right? If you give a synopsis.
So sometimes people may say, I want a synopsis or a summary, and then you would tell the whole story. And those are usually fairly dry. They're not necessarily in voice. They're just like, this is beginning, middle, and end of what I've done. Sometimes if it's nonfiction, you have an overview, which is like, this is what this book will achieve. But if you're just doing that first initial letter, it's something that you want to grab someone's attention, but not, there's a fine line between being like obnoxious and grabbing attention. You want it to be right in between there. And then depending on what else they ask for, sometimes agents will ask for the first 10 pages. Sometimes, they will ask for a table of contents, or there's lots of different things. I also work with graphic novels. So sometimes I'm actually asking for a portfolio of an artist's work. So there are different things that people want to see, and you basically want to just have all of that ready. Some people will say, well, it's only the first 10 pages, so that's all I have to have written, honestly, which has really happened. And
yeah, because here's what happens. You're interested, and then you say, go ahead, please send us the whole manuscript. And if that person needs a year to do that, you're out of the water. You've just wasted a really good connection and a possible relationship with Dara Hyde. Because you said, here's 10 pages, and and she said, where's the manuscript? And you said, oh, I shouldn't have queried so soon.
Yes.
It is really that way. I mean, you can have people do like, your thing is done and it's good and it's been read by several people, but the first 100 pages are really polished, because people often ask for the first 100 pages, and the second 200 pages, it's not unpolished or it's not unfinished or whatever, but it could still use some edit work. People do that to some degree, but you have to be ready to send the whole thing and be proud of the whole thing.
Yes.
The podcast will be back in less than a minute. Hey, writers, are your creative juices running low? Are you skipping writing sessions because you're so busy, or because you're just tired? Well, there's an easy fix.
Really?
Try Mighty Write. Mighty Write gets you writing and keeps you writing.
Ingredients include creativity, writing, coaching, community, and Zoom sessions. Side effects may include productivity, finished work, bragging, and stupid grins. Try Mighty Write. Seriously, click on the link for more info about the Mighty Writers Club. Be mighty! The Mighty Writers Club. Find us at go.decodingcreativity.com/mighty.
Yes. And there are times when, you want to take it as far as you can on your own before you take it to an agent. So we see things that are rough. I mean, I'm used to seeing things, especially with my clients where I've worked with them on several books. That second book, they haven't been working for years on their own, right? We're both in it together. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to do another book. What am I going to do? So we will maybe talk through 5 ideas of what 5 things you may be interested in doing. Okay, let's pick these 2. Let's drill down on those. Is there really a book there? And then you sort of work on it from there, and you go, oh, that's the book. And then you see it very rough. And then, so I'm used to seeing things in all stages of development. So
that's not where you pick up for a new writer. The new writer should be really pretty polished and ready to go. And then once you're in a different collaborative relationship, it could go differently. But you don't want to misinterpret those.
Yeah, no, don't misinterpret those. I think part of what I'm saying is that it takes a long time to even just get a book out there. A lot of people have great ideas. A lot of people start books. To be able to finish them, and with a lot of the people you work with, like to be able to finish a book is a huge feat. And I congratulate anyone who's done it, because it is not easy.
It'll make me cry.
Yeah. It is a hard thing. And then you have to be ready to do the next thing. And there are people who say, well, here's this book. This is what I want to do with it. I may have 3 other ideas. You may come to an agent and say, if I like something, if I've read 50 and then I ask for the whole thing and I've read the whole thing and I like it, the next thing you do is you have that conversation with the agent. I never just sign someone up over email. I have a conversation with them, because that's where you really want to make sure that relationship is solid.
As the writer, I can't imagine signing up by email. Maybe that's old fashioned, but I had lunch with my agent. And then had lunch with my editor as well, because you don't want to think of it as your baby, because that's too stupid. But, you're putting something that you've put a lot of time and energy into their hands and asking them to now collaborate with you on it. And you have to understand that that's what it is. It's not just take it to market. It becomes a real, their vision, your vision blend. Yeah.
So you want to make sure, I am representing that writer. And so you want that relationship to feel really comfortable, but they are also a reflection of the agency. So you want to make sure that that is a good fit, and that, oftentimes I will have ideas, part of what I do and what I've been doing for the many years I've been in publishing is being able to see what maybe isn't working with something and what I think could be done to fix it. And so that conversation is usually like, I really like this. You're really talented. Tell me more about yourself. Okay, this is what we need to do. And I will lay out some of my vision, maybe not all of it, especially if they're talking to other agents, because I'll keep some of my ideas to myself. But I will say, the third act really doesn't work. I think your ending falls flat. I think the characters don't end up where, you want them to, or once I got to the end and I realized what you wanted to do, where you wanted things to end.
What your point was.
I think that we need to go back to, the third chapter and really set things up better, because it's not flowing through. So I will have an idea in mind of some things to fix it when I have that conversation. And if that conversation doesn't feel exciting and, we're not gelling, then oftentimes that's not a good fit. And I will sometimes scare writers, because I will be like, yeah, it's totally not working. And I think and if a writer does not want to do that with me, if it seems like too much work or not the right ideas, they should go with someone else.
I think that can be very exciting, especially if it's stuff you couldn't put your finger on.
Yes.
And it could also be offensive, particularly if you are defensive and you're not sure of, what I'm hearing you say is you clarify. And a lot of writers are either ideators or structurists. So they're in this end of the creative cycle, and you're in this clarify section in terms of your own strength. I'm just guessing. I have never given you the assessment or whatever. But so those things being the case, you could be defending your perfectionism. I spent hours making this perfect, or I spent years making it perfect, when in fact you spent years in your comfort zone without the benefit of somebody else's creative perspective. And it is a gift if you can accept it. And then you do have to, I'm going to just talk about criticism for a minute because it's a big deal in our business.
Yes.
Writers get criticized. There's no two ways about it, but that doesn't mean you have to gird your loins and take it. It means that when criticism comes your way, you just let it sit on your shoulder for a minute and you think, how might that help me? You let in what you want to let in. You are still the writer. But I mean, you make the good point. If you don't agree with my ideas, or you don't agree with a lot of my ideas, or respect the idea that I have ideas, then we're not a fit. But if you can let that Dara's ideas come onto your shoulder and say, how might that help me? And discuss the merits of her ideas in relation to what you've done, you're ahead of the ball game. And that is the problem of a lot of writers looking for an agent, is they don't get that it is immediately and from now on a public collaboration, all the way out till thousands of readers are envisioning your main character differently from how you do.
Yes, and I think, when I've had those conversations and they've clicked, what you said was really interesting about there might be a sticking point that the writer knew. They knew, this one part, they know, this is this. And if I can articulate for them why it's not working for me and maybe have an idea for how to fix it, then sometimes I may have an idea for how to fix it that isn't what ends up being the solution, but it unlocks the idea of let's fix it from here.
It only unlocks that if you're not defensive. It doesn't unlock anything if all you are is what,
Yes.
But yeah, it can become a watershed moment, whether it's your idea or click another idea. But could be a very exhilarating conversation.
It's the most exciting part of my job. Like, I was actually just reading a novel that by a writer I've worked with before. They sent me, they were like, okay, I think it's ready. I've had my beta readers. I'm going to send it to my publisher. So I get my first read. I knew what the book was going to be about. I knew a lot of it, and I started it. I was like, this is not working. This is dry. This isn't the writer's voice. This is really weird, but I'm going to keep going because I know, like, this is a writer that I work with. At a certain point, fairly soon, it all clicked. The voice is there. The characters are there. It's awesome. It ends. I'm crying. It's great. So then I was like, well, wow, that beginning just blows, right? Like, so that was our conversation, was like, I don't know what you've done with the beginning. It is not working at all. And I explained why, but I said, listen, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire because the rest of the book is awesome. And it has your voice and the characters, and it's completely working. So I'm going to make sure you do that in the beginning too. And I suggested one particular thing about starting the book a little later, doing a little bit of here and there. And she was like, oh my God, yeah, wow, okay. Took a night to think about it, emailed me the next day and said, okay, I'm going to do this. And it wasn't exactly what I had suggested, but completely, and like, she was, I think at first, because everyone had told her in her beta group that it was a masterpiece, that her first reaction was like, oh my gosh, why did you? And I was like, I'm sorry, I almost put the book down. It was just not working in the very beginning. And but then to hear the rest of it is working, just do what you're doing here. Why did you need this beginning? Why is it not working? And having those conversations is fantastic. And I may get things to a certain point, send it out to an editor, help sell it. That editor is going to have opinions as well.
Yeah.
And so that continues, and they may be different than, there are times when I'll be like, oh, I definitely think that, we need to save this character. And then the editor might be like, no, I think we can kill that character. You know what I mean? Like, there are big decisions that happen. And it's all in service of making the best book, because that's what we all want. Like, all of us, we do not want to veer too far away from that creator vision. And, I've even had it where the author and I are in alignment. We're bringing the book out to editors. If we're in a position where there's more than one editor interested, you can really compare their visions. So I've had this happen several times where you have a call with an editor who's interested, which is a huge deal. Like, if they call and want to talk to you, that means they're very interested. And, having one who said, my vision for the book, maybe, I want to up the romance and I want it to be a little bit more commercial. We're talking about a novel in this case. And then another editor said, no, I really like this sort of more lyrical, element. Trying to figure out which one of those actually is more in line with you. Or with a nonfiction book, I want more headlines. I want it to be more, commercial again, or do I want it to really go into these social justice issues? And it's amazing when you get to have that opportunity to hear with slight tweaks, what could this book be and what do you want it to be, in making those choices.
And there's financial information in all of that. Because
Yes.
a more commercial book would be more financially
Potentially.
probably. There's
Yeah.
there's like sort of hidden financial information in both those visions.
Yes.
And that's sort of something that the agent has to help you sort too.
Absolutely.
So you can take the finance into account, but then you're also going to take the vision into account, and you're going to take the just process and advance and that editor and what you know about working with that editor, and you're going to take all that into account if you get to the place where either your book goes to auction or you have more than one editor available to you.
Yes.
Or interested in your book. Yeah.
And that is part of what an agent does, is help you talk through all of those options. And even on the times when I send it out and I don't get responses I want, maybe we get a bunch of passes, we get a bunch that are really close, then we have a conversation and say, what do we do from here? Some agents just drop the client and say, listen, we tried, goodbye. That's how they work. And then I'm not one of those. Usually it's like, okay, what did we learn from this process? Do we want to pull the book back? Do we need to work on it? Are we getting certain comments over and over again that make us realize like, oh, we still need to work on this? But then that
book is probably not, it can't go back to those editors. What you're suggesting, you can reshape the book and go to another raft of editors?
Yeah. So unless the editor says, if they want to work on it on their own and come back, sometimes if they liked it, they may say, I'd look at something else from this writer, but not necessarily this book.
Cool.
But what you can do is you can still listen to what they're saying. And if they're all saying, I didn't like this character didn't work for me, then great, let's go back and work on this character. You wouldn't necessarily go back to those editors.
What if that were your main character?
Yeah, then like I actually had that happen recently where the people just really were not connecting with one of the main characters. It was one of several, and the writer has decided to go back and rework that, and we're going to try different editors. And we just really, it was a really hard, we were like so convinced it's a brilliant book, it's a brilliant writer. We were so convinced it would be an easy sell, and it wasn't. And so then you have to go back and think about it. In the meantime, that writer is also
such a big change. That's such a big change. Yeah. And yet still you've agreed. It's sat on your shoulder. You decided, you know what I mean? It's not like coming from on high and you have to do it. It is still your work. You get to decide whether or not those criticisms, and you don't even have to think of them as criticisms, you can think of them as input, whether that input jives with your vision, or if your vision needs to shift for the marketplace and that's okay with you, or, you're steadfast, you were saying some social justice or some feminist scree or bad word. But you know what I'm saying? You might have a point of view that you really want to get out, and changing it would change that. But on the other hand, you may just have like something that wasn't quite working and you get it now. And you could, even if it's another 3 months writing.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing about criticism, is it sounds like work.
Hard. And
I had somebody tell me one of my characters was cardboard, the male character. And I wished I didn't agree. I just wished, but it's true. You have to go, I know. I just thought no one would notice, or I hoped I could get away with it, or, I phoned that one in.
I have to say that I'm one of those people who point that stuff out to a writer. And if they say, I was hoping no one would notice that. And if they have the choice of going with another agent or with me, I'm always curious, if they don't go with me, did they go with someone who let them get away with it? And I have to say that some of those books, because the ones you lost, the ones that you didn't get, I'll always keep an eye out. Oh, has it sold? No, it hasn't sold. So then I'm like, well, that's an interesting thing. I've had some writers come back to me after that and say, listen, I tried to go with a different agent and the book didn't work. Would you be willing to talk to me again? And there are times when maybe I'll reopen that conversation. There are times that I'm like, listen, I've had to move on. But it is interesting to sort of see what happens with that. And, sometimes it's also, well, maybe that's not right. Maybe I don't agree with all the criticisms, but they're not getting what I'm trying to do. So what else can I do to shift? And sometimes it's like, you know what, I'm also holding on to this too tight. Let's try the next book. And there's so many people who maybe have a very successful first book. And then when they're doing interviews to promote the book, you'll find out it's actually their fourth book. It's just the first book that sold.
Yeah. I mean, the first book teaches you how to write a book, and a cardboard character. It teaches you that.
Yes, and that if you're hoping no one will notice, they probably will.
They probably will. Anyway, well, this has been a lot of fun. Is there anything else that you would like to reiterate or state about like how to approach an agent or how to find an agent or the attitude one should have with approaching an agent?
Yeah, I mean, I think being really open, I think listening to them, but also really listening to yourself. I mean, if they say in the third act, you need unicorns, and you thought that's the best idea I've ever heard, that's a really good sign. If you're like, I don't like unicorns, like that's terrible, but maybe still think on it, because I never make my clients, if I'm like having that meeting and I'm offering them representation, I don't want them to say yes in the moment if I've offered it, because it's so exciting. You just want to say yes to be like, oh my gosh, someone said yes. I want them to still think on it. I want them to think it through, and give them the time outside of the pressure of that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That opportunity, right?
And to really think about it. And you have an opportunity to do research and to think. And sometimes it is, wow, I thought I was done. Am I ready to make that next plunge of working on it again? And it can be really hard. I know it's like a marathon sometimes, and people will sort of reach a limit. And, I recently really pushed a writer on a proposal on a pitch. And it was hard. I was like, listen, it is not working. I know you're capable of more. Like, we have to do this. And we were working on, but some of it was very vague. And he almost said, like, I just can't do it. And then he spent a couple days, came back to me. And honestly, right now, we are going to be accepting offers on it. So it was one of those things where I knew I was pushing, and it was like making sure I'm pushing as hard as I can without being, I don't want to be cruel.
Whatever you can't do this week, you might be able to do next week. It isn't the time, it's the space, right? Like, so yeah, that's another argument for waiting a little minute before you send something off to an agent, because you don't want to already be sick of working on it, because, you would like to be like, I had that draft a couple weeks already. And if something came back at me, I would be open to looking at that again, because that is a really big, right now my novel's resting. I'm not going to touch. I'm gonna pick it up again tomorrow. I'm kind of excited, but you know what I mean. I gave it a while, and I would give it a while before I send it out to an agent. It would go out to beta readers. It would go out, and that buys you time too, so that when it's being shopped with an agent or two, you're not sick of it. You can't be sick of it. You can't even write a good query letter if you're sick of it.
Yes.
The other thing I would say, I'll tell you my little trick, and that is, my little trick was that because it's kind of dreadful, like you have dread about it and you get rejections. And so what I did was I sent out 5 a week. They were well researched, that way and stuff. So I sent out 5 a week, and I just hired myself as an assistant to do them. And it'd be like, hello, Mrs. Roberts. I'm here to do that. And so that way, I just did them because Mrs. Roberts was paying me to do them from 12 to 2. So I did them from 12 to 2, and then I'd go to lunch, whatever, like treat myself to something that would help me like get through something that drained me of energy, and maybe, so I hired this assistant to get them sent out, to customize the lead paragraph, etc. All of that stuff that sort of each moment you could quit, because you're like, I don't know what to say in that lead paragraph. Each moment you could quit. So, but someone you hire for $20 an hour is not going to quit. They just do what you tell them to do. So, I just hired myself as once a week. I came in on Fridays from 12 to 2. I did the submissions. And then when they came back with whatever responses, I also just pulled on that hat, the assistant hat, so that I didn't take it too personally. Because then, when you could say, Mrs. Roberts, she had 4 rejections and this person's interested, then there's something there. It's not just the feelings you had. You want to disentangle the feelings from thoughts and actions. So that was my little trick.
Yeah, that is really great. I think all of the different tricks in visualizing, getting a positive answer, and giving yourself distance, and I definitely think letting things cook for a little bit is, or rest after they've cooked, if we're going to go with that, is really helpful, because it does give you a little bit of distance, and you can see it a little bit more as this thing that exists that you worked on, but that is separate from you. Right. And then you can see it a little bit more clearly, so that you can take on that sort of business hat as opposed to that really creative personal hat.
And you're not just
writers
so
have to do
stitched
that.
into that rewrite on chapter 3, because
Yeah.
if that's like all you can think about right now, you're really not representing your whole work. So that's, to me, that's why you need, I mean, I need distance just to do a rewrite, because otherwise I need time between writes, because otherwise all you can see is the one you just fixed. You can't even, have a purview or clarity on something more than that.
And that
But-
skill of being able to switch back and forth is a big part of being a professional writer. Sort of exercising that muscle is huge, because you're going to have to be able to switch back and forth, and then later switch to a public facing, I'm going to go do a bookstore reading, and that is very different, than that person who's alone writing something. So having that, being prepared for that, I think can be really helpful, and knowing that you have those muscles is a huge step in becoming a professional writer.
And in selling yourself as a potentially professional writer.
Mm-hmm.
If it's your first book, you still want to present as somebody who can manage all that.
Yes.
You can visualize that and manage it,
Yep.
Anyway, well, it's really been fun talking about this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Where can people find you? What would they, is just
So
Hill
let's
Nadell?
see. You can find me at the Hill Nadell website, which is just hillnadell.com. I am at DZ Hyde on Twitter, at DZ Hyde on Instagram. I'm also on the manuscript wish list, which I have to update because I'm still closed for queries right now. I have a huge backlog, and I just didn't think it's fair to ask people for new stuff if I'm still sifting through a lot of
How
queries.
many agents are at Hill Nadell?
There's just 2 of us that are the main agents. We're a boutique agency. So it's me and Bonnie Nadell, who's been the head of the agency for a long time. And then we have, assistants and support staff and accounting staff, but it's just the 2 agents. And then we work with co-agents for film and TV at all of the big film and TV agencies. And then we work with co-agents for foreign and translation all over the world.
Very cool. Very cool indeed. Okay. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and I feel like I could have taken notes, and I'm sure that people picked up a lot of information and a lot of they're fortified for the undertaking. And I think that's really important. You can't go at it nervous. We have to do it scared, but you have to also find your incredible alignment, to do it integrally, authentically, and present yourself as somebody of interest. That's really what it boils down to. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. I hope it's useful.
Oh, I'm sure it's useful. It is a big emotional plank that people have to walk. So I'm absolutely glad that you can start to defang it and shed light and, lead us along. And I think it's really important. So I appreciate your point of view so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell your friends. What did you learn today? What was your takeaway? What are you going to do today? Put it in the comments. We all want to know. Meanwhile, get my book, Write Without the Fight. You want to master your creative process so you can write with more ease and satisfaction. The links are all in the description box. Join us, because writers are the best weirdos.